Welcome to Unscripted with DaSco Learning, where we unpack the real-life skills for professionals related to leadership, coaching, communication skills, all enhanced with AI tools. Today, we're going to dive into a number of different things. The latest in the DaSco download. We're going to have a viewer question that we're going to answer along the way. We're going to have some AI hot takes as well, so we can get those tools involved in answering some questions. And then we're also going to deep dive into the lost art of listening. And of course, we'll wrap it up because we want to make sure that you have a takeaway from today. So we're going to empower you and challenge you and what you can take away from the content that we're going to cover.
Let's get started with the latest news in leadership development, artificial intelligence, soft skills, training. Let's talk about it.
The DaSco download.
The DaSco download.
The DaSco download.
So, Amazon Web Service CEO Matt Garman was in an article, featured in an article on CNBC just a few days ago. You should check it out. It came out on August 13th. He talks about the future of work and soft skills in an age where we have artificial intelligence and machine learning. And it's really interesting. It actually addresses something Dave and I have been talking about for a long time, which is the importance of soft skills, whether or not those are going to increase, what types of skills are going to be more in demand as time goes on in the age of AI. Now, here's a quote from Matt Garman, the CEO, in this article. You're going to want to be creative. You're going to want to be good at critical thinking, and you're going to want to be flexible. I think the ability to learn new things and adapt is going to be just as important as any particular skill that you learn. Now, he goes on to talk about the importance of creativity, adaptability, and communication skills, and how all of those soft skills specifically are going to be more in demand. The idea that recruiters are going to be more interested in finding people with those soft skills and communication skills, and they'll prioritize adaptability and people skills as time goes on. Now, AWS is one of a bunch of companies that have announced job cuts based on the fact that they're able to bring in AI to do certain things for them. A lot of companies are going to start doing that more and more in the future. So it's going to change the dynamic of what's important from a skill standpoint. So if you're getting into college now, you have kids that are going through school right now and are going to be entering the workforce in 10 years, 15 years, it could look dramatically different than how it looks today. So, Dave, what do you think this means for leaders and small business professionals right now?
We're in an age now where AI tools can work to our advantage, but ultimately the overuse of AI actually works negatively, in my opinion, towards critical thinking, because we're so accustomed now to putting those into place that it takes away that creativity and the process of solving problems. And so, I read something else recently that shared that 93% of businesses, leaders, they actually value critical thinking more so than an individual's undergraduate degree. And it's because, we take for granted that these AI tools can help us and make us more effective, more productive, right? It eliminates the need for a lot of task-based routine types of problem solving. However, the critical thinking piece to it is it's the nuances, right? And how we can overcome some of the types of solutions that AI just simply can't solve.
I think there's a lot of decisions to be made that AI can't necessarily help with, like whether or not this product is something that people are going to want or need. Dave and I are fully on board with the notion that your communication skills are only going to become more vital to your success down the road. You still have to create a strategy, set a vision, and compel people to follow through with that. I heard a podcast with the CEO of Rivian recently, And he talked about how insanely hard it was to get capital for that company to build and break into the car manufacturing space. The amount of money it takes to just go and build that company from the ground up, and how many times he had to go convince people that it was the right thing to do and it was going to be a success and that sort of thing. AI can't do that part for you. It was his communication ability, his perseverance, his ability to take no's and refine what he was doing and go meet more people and convince people to give him money, to continue to build and continue to grow and continue to invest. So it's a very interesting point. I agree 100% with that notion that soft skills are only going to be more and more important. Communication skills are going to be more and more important. And AI will be a super functional, advantageous tool for all of us to get to know from a skill standpoint and learning how to use it side by side with communication skills and soft skills. I think that's where the sweet spot is. I think that's where people become unstoppable to a certain extent.
Yeah, kind of a hybrid. Yeah, ultimately, I think about like how, we operate when we're going to craft a presentation. And, we might use AI to build out some of the content, but when it comes to the delivery of it, like we have to understand that what the content is that's given to us by these AI tools, we still have to go through and refine that, right? We have to understand, does that sound like DaSco learning? And how do we make that come to life, make it sound authentic? And you can't do that with AI.
No. How does it become relevant? Making things relevant, making things specific enough to make sense and compel people to buy in. Mm-hmm. Those are all important. Yeah. Well, great article. Go check it out. CNBC.com. August 13th is when the article came out. Great read. Interesting. Video to watch too. He was interviewed. Awesome information. Okay, next up, we got a question from a listener. Time for
Ask DaSco.
Okay, this question comes from Alex, who's actually someone we know. We've worked with in the past. He is a real estate professional and has a lot of ventures. He's a business owner, entrepreneur, done a lot of different things in real estate. And for those of you in real estate, you're probably very familiar with how many different things you can get involved with. A lot of different avenues to take in that industry, and Alex is no different. He's definitely someone that is always seeking to grow and to learn for himself, for his company, for his employees. And he has a great question here. Let me read this. How do you decide when a task deserves a human, like a virtual assistant or maybe a local hire, versus when to automate it with AI or software? Specifically, how do you draw the line when the task feels like it needs leadership, intuition, communication nuance, or creative problem solving? When AI, in other words, when AI is good enough, and when does a human still win? Kind of goes along with this article we were just talking about. We have people like Alex running businesses, making those types of decisions right now in terms of when to use people, when to use AI.
So I'll start off by breaking this down into probably the most simple form that you can think of. If the task has a right or wrong answer, then you can probably use AI, some sort of AI tool. If it has multiple answers that require some judgment, some context, right, some creative thinking to it, then it most likely needs a human to do it. But you can expand on that, right? Ultimately, and we kind of already touched on this with that article, is ultimately it's like, what type of task are you looking to complete? Is it rule-based? Is it some sort of reporting, right? Data entry, things of that nature. You can probably utilize AI for something of that nature. If it's just automated responses, ultimately, right? Or if it has some sort of automated workflow to it that can replace a human, sending an email, sending a live chat. Like think about applications like TDO, for instance, which businesses use on their websites to use live chat through an AI agent. That can replace a human being. Now, on the flip side, if you have somebody who is frustrated on the other end, who is trying to get an answer to something, they're like, maybe it's a product or service, and they're using that product or service, and they need an answer, something's not working properly. So ultimately, it's, you might have some crossover, right? Where you feel like you need to be more productive. You may not need a human being to respond to live chat scenarios. But however, once it gets escalated, then you need to bring in a real human being to have an empathetic conversation. There might be multiple ways to solve this problem, so we need a human to be able to take care of that solution and find out what's the right path. So I think about it that way, is like you have either your automated tasks that AI can take care of, or you have multiple paths or solutions where a human needs to come in and be creative and use their critical thinking skills, right?
I think what you said about being rule-based is really important. I think if you can define the role in a certain set of rules, it's a lot easier to then consider using AI as the tool for that, the replacement for that. But if there are nuances to it and there's expected nuances to it, then I think it's probably worth considering getting a human involved. Here's an example that a lot of companies do now: lead generation. If you're in a company, you're trying to build sales, you need to build leads. Our last home purchase a while back, we got so many phone calls from brokers trying to jump in and cut prices and use them as the brokerage service. And I took probably 30 calls. Well, I didn't answer the phone calls, but I got 30 phone calls a day and probably just as many text messages. Now, in that case, these companies are choosing to go with a mass message approach. They don't really care as much about the quality. They're trying to just get that one person out of 1,000 or 10,000 to respond and get involved in a conversation. For example, when I did answer the phone accidentally for some of these phone calls, I would have to wait 3 or 4 seconds before I got routed to someone to answer. And that right out of the gate was a big turnoff in terms of the experience that I had. So I immediately lost interest in whether or not these folks could save me money on the mortgage or on the services provided. So in that sense, yeah, you can automate that if that's the approach, which by the way is an effective approach. A lot of companies do that. Mass lead generation. Cool. AI tool is great. Now, on the flip side, if you're trying to generate leads in a very specific niche or with a very specific set of people or a location or geography or vertical industry or with big businesses, and it's more about networking and building relationships with people to get involved with other people that can refer you, well, then you might want to take a different approach away from AI to make that decision and generate leads that way. Now, that's just one example. That's lead generation. There's 1,000 things that business owners are trying to accomplish every day. But that might help people understand, okay, what do I use here? Should I be paying for, 10, 15 different AI subscriptions that will then, collectively add value in this way? And maybe, yes, that's the answer in certain cases. Is it rule-based? What is the end goal? How much interaction and decision making is involved or is gonna need to be involved? Those would be the things to, in my mind, decide whether or not you need a person or AI.
Yeah. And I want to go back to the second part of Alex's question that says, like, where do you draw the line when you have a task that feels like it might need some leadership intuition or there's some communication nuance? Just think about it. If I said, would you prefer to have a coaching conversation with an AI chatbot or an actual human being? What are you going to say?
Human being.
Yeah, I think we all would, right? Because the emotions that go behind it, the emotional intelligence that leaders possess, that's something you can't match with AI. Now, granted, and I want to plug this too, there are some AI tools that are fantastic that can help a leader become more effective in those conversations. And so that's where I kind of go back to the hybrid model. You're going to need the human form in communication, the leadership. But again, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. It's just I want to kind of simplify it to its form of, is it task-based, is it rule-based, is it automated, or does it simply have some more complexity to it that requires the human?
It would be so easy if the answer was black and white. It's gray, and I think similar to the article that we talked about, similar to Alex's question, I think the answer is gray in a lot of ways. It's very dependent upon specific scenarios and what people are dealing with. I mean, let's face it, there are a lot of things you can do with AI from a task standpoint, we use ChatGPT all the time to ask questions about work, health and wellness. Who knows? Like you said, we design our content using AI, but that also still requires a ton of editing and human involvement to make things relevant.
Speaking of AI tools and ultimately how we leverage them, what do you say we get a little AI hot take?
Let's do it.
Hot takes with AI.
All right, let's see what AI has to say about our primary topic today, which Dave referenced earlier, listening skills. This is important stuff. These are important skills that leaders need to have. So let's see what AI has to say about it. Okay, I need you to act as a learning and development professional and use research that you've gathered, professional research that's out there, to answer this question. And that is, what are the top 5 mistakes that leaders make when they think they are listening, but they really aren't?
So, all right, let's dive into it from an L&D perspective. When it comes to active listening, leaders can sometimes think they're doing a great job, but there are a few classic mistakes that crop up. Based on professional research out there, here are the top 5. Thinking about their response instead of actually listening. A lot of leaders fall into the trap of formulating their own reply while the other person is still talking, interrupting or jumping in too soon. Even well-meaning leaders can interrupt, either to offer a solution or to finish the other person's sentence. Not showing nonverbal listening cues. Sometimes leaders think they're listening, but their body language says otherwise. Dismissing or minimizing the speaker's concerns. Another common mistake is that leaders might jump to problem solving and unintentionally downplay the speaker's emotions. Failing to follow up. Even if a leader listens well in the moment, if they don't follow up or acknowledge what they heard later on, it can feel like that listening never happened.
All right, there we have it. Hot take from AI.
Hot takes with AI.
Valid points there. So, some of the top 5 resonated with me for sure. Interrupting or jumping in too soon. Happens a lot. I know the answer, so I'm just going to tell you. I know what you're trying to say, so let me just get to the answer so I can get through this conversation. Thinking about the response instead of actually listening. Not showing nonverbal cues, being dismissive physically makes the person feel dismissed mentally. Those are all great examples of what happened. We've all experienced those.
Coaching conversations when you're sitting across the table, or maybe you're on a Zoom meeting, and you see the other person sitting on their phone. I mean, there's nothing worse than that to me. Okay, let's start with the basics, Scott. Listening is not the same as hearing. Hearing is ultimately the sound waves entering your ears, but listening is the action of actually paying attention, processing the information that you are hearing, and then providing some sort of response ultimately. Let's just start with an actual statistic. The human being only retains 25% of the information that they consume. So think about it this way. If you and I have a 10-minute conversation, ultimately you or I are only walking away with 2 to 3 minutes of that content and what we're retaining from that conversation.
There's 4 levels of listening. Number 1, ignoring. Now, this is being completely checked out. This is being on your phone, not paying attention. This is what a lot of companies fear when it comes to remote employment. This is people being on a virtual meeting and just scrolling through social media the entire time, being totally tuned out. You call on someone and they check in. Wait, what was that again? Sorry, you cut out. And it's a total excuse for just having not actually been paying attention whatsoever.
Next one I think about is pretend listening. And that's when, somebody is maybe looking at you and they're nodding. Mm-hmm. They might say, yeah, gotcha. Yeah. But you can tell that they are thinking about something else. Maybe it's like, what do I need to do in my next meeting? What am I having for lunch? And they're not having some sort of response that makes any sense other than just like, yeah, and they're nodding. Or maybe they're not even giving you eye contact, right? They might be saying, but they're looking at their phone. That's the pretend listening.
Number 3 is selective listening. I might hear my wife tell me we have a really important date scheduled. Maybe we're meeting someone from dinner. Maybe relatives are coming to town. Maybe there's a birthday party to go to. Who knows? That part I listen to. No problem. What I might selectively choose not to hear is when that is. And so sure enough, every single day I'm asking my wife, wait a second, what are we doing tonight? Did you say we have something today to go to? That's selective listening.
Yeah, and the last level of listening is really the positive one. Right? We talked about some of the ones that are not the most effective ways to listen, but then you have the active, empathetic listening. And what does that look like? What does that sound like? Ultimately, it's actually paying attention to not only what they're saying, hearing what they're saying, but paying attention to the nonverbal cues. And maybe they're shutting down, they're crossed arms, they're not looking at you. It's ultimately how am I putting myself in that customer's or that client or my employee's shoes? And ultimately, this is where a lot of leaders that are the most effective, they're great at active listening, being empathetic.
Now, why this matters? Well, a lot of reasons. Let's start with trust. Trust is a big part of why active listening skills are really important. When people feel that they're heard, they feel trusted. They're more likely to do and say the things that you expect people to do and say when they leave the room or leave the meeting, because there's trust involved. And that stems from whether or not we're actively listening.
Well, persuasion, in my opinion, it comes from trust. Trust is your persuasive factor. If somebody believes that you're listening to them, they are being heard, then they're going to trust you, and ultimately you'll be able to persuade them. And you'll have a much higher level of team engagement along the way if you are a great listener. You hear the 80-20 rule, and there's no secret to that. In sales specifically, if you're doing 20% of the talking, you are going to be much more effective if you're listening 80% of the time.
That also takes us to productivity. Productivity increases when there's more trust, when people are listening to each other. You might just not need nearly as many meetings as you normally would, or that you think you do, if everyone just displayed better active listening skills. In those cases, maybe instead of retaining 25% of the meeting, people are retaining 50 to 60% of the meeting. And that leads to less confusion, less mistakes, increased productivity, increased revenue, less confusion. All of those things benefit from better active listening skills from everybody.
All right. So let's bust a couple of myths. The first one is, I'm multitasking, but I'm still listening. So there are some really great multitaskers out there, but ultimately when it comes to listening and be able to retain all the information, it kind of goes back to what we just talked about in the sense that the human only retains 25% of the information that they consume, right? So you can't truly multitask.
When people say I can multitask really well, what they're basically saying is, I don't mind not being great at all of these things. Because there's no way you're going to be able to do multiple things at the same time and execute the same quality. Now, in a lot of cases, this is not a big deal, right? You can talk on the phone and do something around the house at the same time. It's not a big deal. But you get to a point where in work environments or even social environments, the more you try to accomplish in a given period of time definitely takes away from the quality, and especially takes away from the nuances and the details that you're missing out on in certain conversations or even in certain emails, which is a classic example of people trying to multitask. Checking emails while they're listening into a call, something's got to give. Yeah. There's some aspect of information or detail that you're going to lose because you're trying to do those things.
You're either listening very poorly and you're doing the other task really great, or vice versa.
Yeah.
One or the other.
Or each of them is getting 50% dedicated support. So, yeah, in some cases it can be helpful to get multiple things done at once, but not great.
The other myth is, I already know what they're going to say. Now, that kind of ties back into when we did the AI hot take, right? Cutting people off because you feel like, I already know how they're going to finish this. I have a solution for them. They're jumping right in. We miss a lot of the nuances. Maybe there's another factor to what it is that they're going to share. So we miss out on some of that content if we just jump right in.
Okay. I think it's time for another AI hot take.
Pew, pew, pew.
Hot takes with AI.
Okay, this time, let's see what AI has to say about how do we get better at doing this stuff, fixing our ability to listen. Okay, I need you to act like a leadership development professional once again. And this time around, looking for ways and techniques to get better at active listening. So what are the top 3 techniques that leaders and business professionals can use to become better listeners in everyday conversations?
So when it comes to really leveling up active listening, there are a few tried and true techniques that leaders can lean on. First, there's reflective listening. This means summarizing or paraphrasing what the other person has said to confirm you've understood them. For example, you might say, so what I'm hearing is you're concerned about X, is that right? Second, practicing mindful presence is key. This means really focusing on the speaker without distractions, putting away the phone, maintaining eye contact, and being fully in the moment. And third, encourage open-ended questions. Instead of yes/no questions, ask things that invite the other person to elaborate, like, can you tell me more about that? Or what are your thoughts on how we might solve this together?
Very friendly voice. So great examples of things that we can do, reflective listening, paraphrasing what people say. Definitely checks in. It makes the person feel heard, also picks up on the detail, ensures that we don't miss out on the nuance of the conversation. That's really, really effective. Great advice from AI. Let's talk about some things that Dave and I recommend that you do to work on your active listening skills. And this takes us to the DaSco Challenge of the Week. We believe in empowerment. We want people to be able to walk away and actually know what to do and how to grow themselves, level themselves up with learning and development, soft skills. So here's our take today. If you want to become a better listener, there's a lot of tools out there that can help you do it. Nowadays, apps like Zoom. If you use Zoom, there's an AI companion that you can use that will record meetings and then give you the analytics based on how much of the talking did you do, which ultimately tells you how much of the listening did you do. You can record your touch bases with employees. And by the way, Zoom isn't the only company that does it. Otter, Fireflies, Fathom, they also provide meeting summaries, transcripts, analytics, and, back to the debate about in-office versus remote employment. I have a colleague that works remotely, and they talk to customers several times during the week. And those are longer meetings. Those are meetings that are planned and scheduled. And sure enough, those are meetings that are recorded. And that colleague and their managers, they can actually look back at that call, take a look at the analytics, and they do coach each other on how much talking they did versus how many questions they asked, how much they repeated and paraphrased what was said in the meeting. So you can actually track that with real live data.
Great recommendations. One of our favorites as well, you can use AI tools outside of work, and one of our favorite tools is Replica. This is kind of like your own personal coaching assistant where you can have real conversations. Obviously, it's an AI chatbot, but ultimately, it can help you to practice through using reflective questions, paraphrasing, using empathy, mirroring, all the things that was talked about in our AI hot take. But we need to practice. It's just like any other skill. And if you find yourself jumping into conversations, how do you pause? How do you use something as simple as Replica to help you craft that skill and be more effective in those conversations?
Okay, there's a couple of suggestions for you to use. The DaSco Challenge of the Week. Become a better listener. It's not as complicated as it sounds. It just takes some awareness, is about 50% of the solution. Just being aware that there's an opportunity to become a better listener, knowing that that's the case, knowing how much and believing how much impact that can have positively on your relationships at work, personally, professionally, all of them. Okay, we started today talking about the future of soft skills in an era of artificial intelligence. We answered a listener question. Thanks, Alex, for that question. That was great, tied in wonderfully to the conversation today. We let ChatGPT weigh in with some AI hot takes on what we think about listening skills and how to improve those. And we left you with a DaSco challenge, some very practical ways to get better at listening skills. So a lot accomplished. Hopefully you got a lot out of it.
Yeah, and we highly encourage you to subscribe, give us a DM, send us a note. If you have a question that you'd like for us to maybe answer for you and help provide some guidance, please do. Send us a note, and we'll be happy to answer these questions during our next podcast.
If you go to DaScoLearning.com and subscribe, you will get an automated email with some great prompts that you can use to enter into AI tools like ChatGPT that might help you with your next leadership presentation, your next leadership conversation, your next meeting. Who knows? So go in there, subscribe. It's free. We'd love for you to get that tool. So check that out, and also follow us on Instagram. Stay tuned in the future for more podcasts. All right, that's it.
DaSco.